We are joined here by Ruth today, and I do not want to take the honor away from introducing you to Ruth. I think I would love you to introduce yourself and let everyone know who you are.
Thanks, Greg. Happy to be here. I'm Ruth Hynes, and I'm a Director for Research and Strategy for Work Dynamics in JLL.
There we go. Hopefully that was a bit of a softball to start introducing. I've got a few more softballs. So just in terms of the housekeeping stuff, so setting the scene. So yeah, we're going to be exploring the latest research and insights from JLL via Ruth as it pertains to really the importance and utility of data as a means to improve workplace strategy and planning. We are going to have polls along the way. So this is where you hear from me that I am going to ask you in some way, shape or form to participate. So along the way, we will have polls that come up into the chat. Please do participate in them, because at the end of the session, we will share those results with everyone. So the more people that participate, the more interesting those polls are. So please do. You'll see them pop in the chat. And the last thing to touch on would be questions. So questions. We are planning to build in time to answer questions. And you will have noticed I said planning to. So if you have one, please do pop it in the chat in real time. It's absolutely fine. Don't feel like you have to hold them to the end. Pop it in, and we'll make sure that those are consolidated and shared at the end. In the event that I have rabbited on slightly too much, and it will be me, it won't be Ruth, which is a real risk. We will respond to these questions post-webinar, along with sharing the poll results and the research, etc. So yeah, please do contribute to those. Let's kick off, Ruth. Another softball, just getting us teased in. An easy one, or at least I hope so. What is the role of work dynamics within JLL?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a good question. I think many people might not be familiar with work dynamics within the wider kind of JLL business. But our work dynamics business line is really focused on everything to do with the world of work. So we're seeing, we'll talk about this later, kind of the increasing complexity around the world of work. Work is no longer just a place that we go, but it's the things that we do. And so within Work Dynamics, we cover a huge range of different services to kind of support our clients within that. So it's everything from kind of workplace strategy, facilities management, occupancy planning, design solutions, project management, really quite a broad range, but everything to kind of really help kind of with those complex challenges that we're seeing.
That is big and broad. I can imagine all the time, because it's interesting. Typically when you think of folks that are involved in research and insights teams specifically, you think it's the team who publish reports, which clearly is a part of the puzzle, absolutely. But there's a ton of other work that goes in, more real time and kind of I think right now probably a lot closer to clients as well, and right at the heart of the conversation. So yeah, I mean, again, maybe it's another softball question, but one I really wanted to ask, so I've shoehorned my own question here, which is, it'd be good to understand, the role research specifically is playing currently within JLL, and like how has that changed kind of over time?
Yeah, so I think particularly within our kind of work dynamics research team, we've really widened the kind of topics and the types of research that we do. So we're looking at lots of different things, from kind of hybrid patterns through to employee experience, occupancy and utilization, technology, sustainability, and really kind of looking at the connections between those as well. And so a lot of that is, looking at data that we hold ourselves, but also working closely with our clients to understand, kind of where they currently sit, what are the kind of key trends that they're seeing, how they might compare regionally, and really trying to understand and unpick some of the kind of the detail, I guess, kind of behind some of these big real estate drivers that we see.
Thank you very much. And I've just had a pop-up in my you've seen the same. So you've seen the same there. So there's no excuses to miss it. It seems, at least from my perspective. So the first poll questions there. Please do respond. That's super interesting, Ruth. And I've got a slight tangent question. Actually, it's connected, and I don't want to take us off topic. So obviously, the topic today is obviously data insights improve workplace strategy and planning. But is there another kind of I guess theme that you've been working on recently that's been like the hot topic? And again, we're not going to go into depths and breadth and detail on that, but that's just off script. Be good to understand if there's evolving at the moment.
Absolutely. I think that one of the big topics at the moment that we'll be talking about kind of later in the year as well is the future of work and workplace, and looking further ahead as well. So you know, what I'm talking about today is really, you know, research that we've done on kind of what the current state is, you know, across real estate and amongst our clients, whether it's occupiers or investors. But we're also looking at what shape is it kind of going to look like in 2030 and beyond. You know, kind of what do people think are going to be the big kind of influences, you know, whether that's the way that we work, how we occupy spaces, you know, maybe kind of changes to the working week again. So lots of really interesting topics around that as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I won't take us on a tangent anymore. I shall promise that. Look, you know, the world of work is continuing to evolve, and I think, you know, challenges are being felt by real estate leaders, workplace leaders, and actually, interestingly, more from our people leaders, people teams. You know, it's a huge impact there, which I want to kind of dig into later. And kind of as the needs of business and people actually kind of intertwine almost more than they ever have, it's a really interesting moment. But it'd be good, you know, specifically with kind of commercial real estate leaders and workplace leaders, to understand some of the challenges, getting to the crux of what are some of the challenges that you're seeing them face as they continue to have to shift and adapt, given, you know, work styles and work patterns are needing to change and shift. Or
yeah, definitely. And I'm hopefully going to pick up on a couple of the points actually that you made, because I think you're spot on. That is kind of where we are at the moment. So the most recent research that we released, our Global Occupancy Planning Benchmark Report, looked at some of these questions, and we found that 87% of organizations that we surveyed have implemented hybrid working. And so, you know, that is now the norm. You know, flexible working, you know, different kind of variations of flexibility, you know, are not new, but they used to be the kind of exception to the rule, and now it's very much the norm. And so that's something that we're still grappling with in terms of, you know, what that looks like in the long term. And then within the same survey, we also asked what the drivers were behind hybrid programs or policies, and that was really interesting. So the top driver globally was actually space optimization at the moment. And this was closely followed then by supporting the employee experience and supporting new working styles. So that kind of picks up the topics that you're talking about. But I think it also highlights the challenge that we're seeing come up kind of over and over again at the moment. And how do you get the balance of those things within the kind of wider context of, you know, financial constraints, space constraints, etc. You know, so if we think for a second just on, you know, supporting new working styles, lots of organizations are, you know, kind of implementing changes. They're adding collaboration spaces, you know, focused work areas, you know, kind of more different types of workstations. But all of those things take up space. And so that's kind of in conflict sometimes with that optimization goal. And then we're also seeing on the other side that, you know, sometimes some of those settings, when they're kind of put together, they can also have conflicts as well. So if they're not really well planned, your collaboration space or your kind of breakout or kitchen spaces can impact on a quieter focus space or just kind of general workstation. So I think that's really the kind of the big challenge at the moment. And then you add in technology, and you add in sustainability, and you add in financial constraints, and really it's a really difficult balancing act for corporate real estate leaders at the moment.
100%. And again, it's, yeah, what you're saying is completely resonating with, you know, the tons and tons of conversations that I've had and you know, people in our team have had. And you know, and it's kind of reaffirmed by some of the stuff that we're seeing in the poll, which is a lot of this is around occupancy, space utilization, etc., etc. And understanding future requirements is another one. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering, you know, this is a wonder. It's like, how much of that is dictated by, and I say I wonder, maybe I'm kind of asserting more than I'm asking a question, is based on the kind of reality of the world right now, which is many companies are still you know, committed and obligated to you know, leased assets for a significant period of time, and so that becomes maybe the first focus is optimization from a, you know, from a spend perspective, or from a kind of cost optimization perspective, versus optimizing around people. And I appreciate it's a really tough balance. You know, it's easy to say optimize around people when you haven't got, 300,000 square foot of, underutilized lease assets on your books, right? So yeah, I'm wondering how much of it's driven by kind of where we are right now, and that being the focus and priority. And the two aren't probably mutual; they're not mutually exclusive. But yeah, be good to get your sense on. Do you get a sense that a lot of companies are looking at it from that perspective? It's being more efficient from a cost perspective more than anything else currently.
Yeah, I mean, I think that again, what you said probably is spot on, because I think that there's an uncertainty around that still. So there is absolutely, I think, the first kind of challenge, the first driver or goal for many strategies is around, kind of making the most of underutilized space, and thinking about the cost implications of that. So we found as well that kind of utilization across offices globally, as you can imagine, is pretty low. So it's kind of averaging about kind of 45 to 50%, but organizations are targeting kind of pre-pandemic levels of 70 to 75%. And so that's a really big challenge, within existing kind of lease arrangements, and trying to kind of understand where you can, kind of address that at a portfolio scale. And so that is probably the kind of key consideration, but also really closely followed by what does that then mean for the employees, and some of the challenges with still getting people back to the office, trying to kind of manage the the kind of fluctuating weekly pattern, the clustering around Tuesday to Thursday, trying to ensure that people have a good experience when they come in, thinking about how that impacts on their work, their productivity, retention, all of those other aspects as well. So I think that order is probably right, but I think it probably shifts up and down depending on the conversation or the time of year.
Yeah, no, 100%. And then, double tapping on this kind of idea of future planning, and kind of where that, leveraging data clearly is like super important, right? And understanding what the actual needs of the business here and now as it pertains to the amount of space you need. But it's actually interesting because, there's a big topic, and we actually did a previous webinar, was titled, maybe quite provocatively, so your RTO mandate failed, now what?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And there's this kind of point in time, which is your mandate will drive, if your mandate is 3v2 or 2v3 or 4v1 or 5, then you'll see the data that's driven by that mandate, right? So you'll see the occupancy levels, and actually what you'll then continue to kind of optimize around from your real estate perspective is those days. But is that the thing that serves the people? And actually, could you be more efficient than that if you were to open that up slightly? Again, big challenge, easier said than done. And when you said that 70% targeting that 70% occupancy, it's like, what's driving that? Where did that figure of 70% come from? It's probably come back from in some respects stemming some loss from the outlay of that building. And I think it's probably just a product of the time that we're in now. But yeah, we are seeing more and more companies actually take big swings at reducing. So we've seen quite publicly companies paying in the millions to exit lease agreements, because actually it was double the amount in millions for the ongoing liability. So some companies are taking that proactive approach. And I think actually, it's obviously a brave swing to do that, and more companies will do that as that maybe becomes more normal. But yeah, really, really, really interesting time, and there are just a ton of challenges out there at the moment. And I think the term hybrid in of itself, because we talk about hybrid and hybrids in kind of here, there, and everywhere. And I think hybrid's an interesting one because that continues to change and what people believe in that, because a lot of companies operate in a hybrid manner, but either maybe don't want to be, or don't consider themselves a hybrid company, which is quite interesting. And some do, but we see far more and more, and this has been as example of this publicly as well, of companies actually not speaking about hybrid, but branding their workplace policies, which have all got different elements of hybrid working styles, but they're not calling it hybrid. This is specifically what our organization believes is the next step. And I find that quite interesting, because it's less about, are you a hybrid company, you're not a hybrid company, and what is your version of hybrid? It's more, what is your workplace policy, and how is that supporting your business currently, both from a financial perspective, people perspective, productivity perspective. And it's so nuanced to the company, right? Because it's not every company has the same makeup of people, whether that be geographically or job for example. So yeah, I mean, I guess my question to you would be in terms of that, the term hybrid, how are you seeing that term evolve and be understood in the market? And is that kind of shifted that the perception of that term, in terms of the people that you've been working with?
Yes, I think hybrid. I mean, it's a kind of a tricky one because people are sometimes tired of the term. Actually, they're kind of saying, we're still talking about hybrid. We've kind of accepted that that's the norm. But actually, the maturity of it has grown, absolutely. So we kind of have a better sense of, kind of generally speaking, the number of days people come into the office. We did some research last year that kind of found it was kind of 3.1 days on average globally people are in the office. So that feels about right, I think, for most organizations. But now we're seeing more organizations kind of thinking about some of the detail that you mentioned, that it needs to be more than that in order to be specific to their organization and what they're trying to get out of their hybrid program. So one of the things I was quite surprised about actually in the survey that we did for the occupancy planning report was that whilst hybrid was really high, tracking utilization actually was really high as well. So kind of more than 70% of organizations are doing that. There was a much lower number of organizations that were implementing, kind of detail in their policies. So kind of only 15% were actually mandating specific days. So that's one really good strategy to optimize if you can define the days that certain teams are coming in on. I think only a third had a change management program. So that's really critical for the long success of hybrid working, I think. So I think there's still a really big gap in organizations understanding kind of how they can make hybrid work for them in particular. And, eventually it will just be, there's workplace policies, there's hybrid policies. Every organization has a different one of those. You wouldn't assume every workplace policy to be the same. So we can't assume every hybrid policy to be the same. And so moving away from just the number of days in the conversation is going to help with that.
Yeah, totally agreed. And I think, interestingly, leads me into kind of a next musing, which is, and just something I've seen, which is there's a bit of across the board acceptance now that it's not as simple as saying, okay, we operate this many days in office and not
exactly
out. Or, we are going to go and be more distributed, right? And it's not just because of things like, oh, what's the cost implication of that right now when we can't, realize savings because we're still committed to assets, as an example. It's things like, what communication tools do you embrace, and how? And so I give you a real example: Slack, right? Slack, a number of Slack, but the way people use Slack will be very different. So I've been in a company where Slack was literally, WhatsApp for business, just chat. And I've also been in a business where Slack is for everything. So absolutely everything, big important updates, but actually email, all you use that for is external. So that's one small example. How do you run projects? What if you're not all in it at the same time, how are you running projects? What's the purpose of in-person meetings? That's a question I don't think people necessarily have had to ask. So what's the purpose of us getting together? What are the measures of success for individuals? Managing that old, kind of the old archaic thing of I know my team are here in the office, and therefore I can see that they are working. And all of us in the call, I'm sure, have had that colleague that who spent half their time on Facebook, or at least a little bit of time on that, or maybe online shopping. But how do we manage people in this new environment to outcomes? And for the managers, how do you read? Another interesting insight I got from the head of real estate was about thinking about how they retrain managers in this new environment. And so these things combined, actually, they compound to a lot of considerations that aren't as simple as, let's just shift. And I think all these are really geared around the idea that they do not want to negatively impact performance, productivity, employee engagement, and culture. And so it'd be good to, again, Ruth, if you can speak to, how you're seeing these kind of maturing programs, support, workplace performance and satisfaction.
Yeah, we looked at the types of work activities actually that are happening within the office, and that was kind of really to kind of dig into, a lot of organizations actually at the beginning of the pandemic, shifted to a hybrid approach that was about collaboration first in the office. So encouraging you to come in for your meetings, do your focused work at home. But that's actually really hard to manage and schedule as an individual or as a team. And so what we looked at was the amount of time that people were spending on focused work, which was about half of their time whilst in the office. And then I think it was about 27% on virtual collaboration, and then 23% on face-to-face collaboration. So it really kind of spoke to the fact that the office itself needs to better provide for all of those activities. So it's not just about collaboration space. And we're seeing that a lot across, a lot of the industry news, kind of acoustics is a really big issue, space for private working, space for focused working. But also I think now that the conversation has shifted so far that way, we've kind of forgotten again about collaboration, and particularly virtual collaboration, and providing the right spaces for that as well. Interacting virtually as we're doing now is great. But if we were to add in, multiple more people, you're trying to, kind of run through a project initiation or ideation stage, it gets trickier, and you need more tools, you need more ways to kind of interact. And there's some great technology that's coming up, which is really exciting, actually. So looking at kind of intelligent camera systems, more connected kind of whiteboards between, kind of locations. So you can draw on a whiteboard in London and it comes up in New York, or versions of that. And I think that's really important to really think about how technology starts to integrate with the spaces that we have. And it also really helps as well with understanding how those spaces are used, because a lot of the time previously it was kind of guesswork, where you'd kind of walk around, have somebody walk around kind of once a week and see what was being used. But the more the technology is integrated, the more that we can, get value from the data, understanding when it's being used, how it's being used. So there's a lot of really great opportunities around the kind of technology and how that can support all of those different ways of working. And I think that's going to really help with that employee experience challenge that we're seeing, as well as obviously the kind of need for change management and having people involved in that process, and really kind of, curating what's happening. So I think it's a little bit of both there.
Yeah, spot on. And your point there about bringing people together. Bringing people together is actually, at the forefront of everyone's, again, what we're speaking to is there's a real big focus around bringing people together, and you have to be more intentional, more thoughtful about that, proactive with that. When you're more distributed, the more distributed you are, the more intentional you have to be with these things. And the truth is that more and more companies will have, at least pockets of distributed folks. And so it becomes a really, really big focus. Again, this is not a Desana plug, but maybe it is. It's kind of, one of the main reasons we exist, right? Is to be able to bring people to lower the barriers of bringing people together, whether that's client meeting, whether that's team offsite, all the way down to whether that's just you getting out and not working at your kitchen table, or if you're so lucky at home office, to be around other folks, bringing people together, because that's, the fundamental of things is just because things have become more flexible and there is some level of distribution continue to happen, doesn't mean being together, it does not have a huge value. It does. It's just we have to be more intentional with it. So I think you're absolutely spot on. Yeah.
And I think also just on that point as well, that it's different for different people as well. I think that there's, a lot of focus on kind of individuals, and having that flexibility for an individual, but you also have to think about how teams connect, and making that, something that's, positive for everybody. Because some people prefer to be in the office. They want to come in, 4 or 5 days a week, or some people don't have a space actually to work at home. And so, being able to support that as well, so again, it's a kind of tricky balancing act, but I think that value of bringing people together, in whatever form, however regular, works for your team, for your organization. But yeah, it's still definitely something that we get a lot of value from.
100% agreed. And I was going to do this at the end, but I think Amanda's raised a really great question, which I keep looking back to. So Amanda, thank you for that question. I want to get to this actually, but Ruth, I want to go to you first on this. So bums on seats, is that a win in itself? And how do they understand if it's just getting more bodies in the office? Is this actually is benefiting the business? Or is it just making them feel better about the lease? It's a very good question.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it kind of speaks to something that I know we talked about kind of recently as well. But we talk a lot about data and the importance of utilization data, you know, it would be great to see more organizations thinking about, you know, more granular data around, you know, meeting rooms, collaboration spaces, but that only gives you one side as well. So that tells you how many bums on seats there are. That gives you kind of a mechanism to understand that. But you want to make sure that people who are coming in, you know, have a good experience. They feel that they can work productively. They feel that they're having good connections, meaningful connections. And so we're seeing a lot more employee experience surveys actually kind of come out, more organizations looking for those more regularly and focusing them on the workplace. You know, so not just, you know, how do you feel about training? How do you feel about kind of, you know, processes, but how do you feel about the workspace and the time that you spend in there? And so connecting all of those different data sets, I think is really powerful, and something that I think will provide a lot of kind of insights for organizations that can do that.
And I'm going to, as a follow-up question, Ruth, put you on the spot. Have you seen anyone do that well? And have you seen an example where someone's done that well to a great outcome? Because I think a lot of companies are seemingly at the start of merging those two data sets to inform decision making. But have you seen that well?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of organizations are doing one or the other, or maybe they're doing both, but they don't speak to each other. You know, they're kind of maybe undertaken by different departments, so that's a little tricky. But I have seen it done well actually with a few universities that I've worked with previously. So they're really kind of looking at what data they have and trying to kind of maximize the value from it. You know, they're kind of trying to kind of implement, you know, capital projects, you know, within quite tight budgets. So they're really looking to kind of maximize any evidence and data, as you can imagine, in the education sphere. It's kind of at the forefront. So I think there's some really good examples there that have worked really well to inform capital projects in particular. But I don't see so many using it to kind of, you know, manage, you know, kind of longer term, you know, their kind of workplace strategies or facilities management strategies.
Thank you very much. I think it was very comprehensive and nothing to add. I mean, it's spot on. Ruth, you've been fantastic. And I want to make sure we've got a minute left, and I will wrap up. I want to ask one big blue sky question, which is next 10 years, where do you think you'll see the most change as it relates to, you know, the evolution of the workplace?
Yeah, good question. Always good to be thinking ahead, I think. I think definitely the big change that we'll see is AI. And I'm going to talk about it in two ways very briefly. So I think it's an amazing tool that we should be leveraging now to get more insights from the data that we have. You know, so I think we collect a lot of data, but maybe the people who would get value from it don't have the time to kind of delve into it. So AI could be something that could really start to unlock some of those insights and get it, you know, get the data that we have more used in decision making. And then the other way I think that it's going to change the world of work is how people work. You know, so we're hearing a lot about how AI might take over more kind of day-to-day tasks and leave more room for, you know, kind of analytical, creative innovation, etc. You know, so how is that going to change the type of workspaces that we need or the type of technology that we need? So I think it's a really interesting time now to see how that might kind of catapult in a couple of different ways, actually.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, I'm at the start of the journey myself, kind of leveraging ChatGPT as much as I can to help me be more efficient in my own work. I think it's a great answer. And Ruth, thank you so much. And I'm conscious that we are now a minute over time, but I do want to wrap and thank everyone. And if there are questions that have been unanswered, as I said, we'll respond to those in email with the poll results as well. I just want to say thank you to everyone who attended today. Really appreciate your attendance. I hope you found it valuable and insightful, and that's the point of these. It's not just because I like the sound of my own voice. I actually don't, funnily enough, on recording. I'd like to thank Ruth. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I think we could have done an hour on this, maybe 2 hours. And so much to unpack, but obviously we've got the report shared, and people can dig into as they need.
Absolutely.
We can find you on LinkedIn to ask you some questions.
Absolutely.
Tomorrow we'll share the recording with everyone and with folks that weren't able to attend, along with all the links and things and results from the polls and answers to questions. yeah, again, I hope you found it informative. We will be doing these again. So I actually will doing the next one again myself. Hopefully that's not a deterrent for those of you who joined today around a slightly different topic, which is building trust and high performance teams, which is, yeah, slightly different, but again, very, very interesting. So that is 2nd of July, I believe, unless I've got that horribly wrong. But
So I'll be looking forward to that.
there we go. Thank you again, everyone, so much, and thanks to Jenny, who's in the background and no one will have seen, but she's been amazing at pulling this all together and is the master behind all the polls. So thank you for joining us today, everyone, and yeah, looking forward to connecting with anyone who wants to pick mine or Ruth's brain. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.